She had just 10 seconds to breathe each morning, and 23 hours 59 minutes to survive. Amara James never imagined her life would change just because her babysitter fell and couldn't take her son. But when little Caleb ran across the marble lobby of Kensington Holdings, straight into the arms of the most powerful man in the city, and called him Daddy, the world shifted. Have you ever had a moment where everything changed with a single word? Before we dive into this emotional journey of love legacy and second chances, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Now let's begin. Have you ever had a moment where everything changed with a single word? Before we dive into this emotional journey of love legacy and second chances, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And if stories like this speak to your heart, go ahead and subscribe. We've got more just for you. The alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., sharp and unforgiving. Amara didn't hit snooze. She never did. She didn't have the luxury of 5 more minutes. She sat up slowly on the edge of the narrow bed, her feet touching the cold floor of their tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. For a moment, she let her eyes wander to the closed door across the hallway, where 5-year-old Caleb was still sleeping. He was the reason she kept going, the reason she traded her degree in literature for a job scheduling meetings, answering calls, and preparing presentations for a CEO who barely remembered her name. Every day was a choreography of sacrifice coffee on the stovetop because the machine broke months ago. A white blouse ironed the night before, lunch packed in a cracked Paw Patrol lunchbox, and a quiet prayer whispered on the subway, "Let today be calm. Let him be safe. Let me not mess this up." What Amara didn't know was that today nothing would go according to plan. And somehow, that would be the greatest gift the universe had ever given her. By 7:00 a.m., Amara had already dropped Caleb off at Mrs. Daly's apartment, an older widow who lived down the hall and had become an unofficial grandma over the past year. But just as she stepped off the train, her phone buzzed with a text that made her stomach drop. "Amara, I'm so sorry. I slipped in the kitchen. My hips messed up bad. I'm on my way to the ER. I can't take Caleb today." Panic surged through her chest. School didn't start for another week. All her backup sitters were either out of town or already at work. And Mr. Graham Kensington was not the kind of man who accepted personal emergencies as an excuse for anything. By the time she reached the towering glass building that pierced the Manhattan skyline, her decision was made. She would bring Caleb with her, just for today, just until lunch, just until she could figure something out. With one hand gripping Caleb's small fingers and the other clutching her tote bag, Amara marched through the lobby of Kensington Holdings, her heart pounding like a war drum. "You remember what I said, baby," she whispered as the elevator doors closed behind them. Caleb nodded solemnly. "Be quiet. No running. Don't touch nothing." She kissed the top of his curls. "That's my good boy." They stepped onto the executive floor. It was silent and cold like always. She guided him to the corner near her desk and handed him crayons, his worn tablet, and a small bag of animal crackers. "Right here, okay, I'm just going to the copier." But before she could even turn around, the elevator dinged. The air shifted. Every assistant straightened. Every whisper stopped. Graham Kensington had arrived. He didn't walk. He entered. Like power itself, wore a tailored suit. Amara turned, forced a polite smile, and held out the printed reports. And then in a heartbeat, everything unraveled. "Daddy!" The word exploded from Caleb's mouth like a firecracker in a funeral. Before she could stop him, he ran tiny arms open wide, straight into the stunned arms of Graham Kensington. Time stopped. The room, the papers, the air conditioning hum. Everything froze. Caleb's little arms wrapped tightly around Graham's waist, and the boy looked up with a grin so full of joy it pierced the silence. "I knew you were real," he whispered. "You're the daddy in my dreams." Gas scattered through the office like wind chimes in a storm. Amara felt her blood drain to her feet. Her feet wouldn't move. Her mouth couldn't form words. She'd rehearsed so many worst-case scenarios in life, but this her 5-year-old calling the CEO of the company daddy. She bolted toward them. "Mr. Kensington, I'm Caleb's sweetie, let go, please." But Graham didn't flinch, didn't scowl, didn't even look annoyed. He looked confused, staring down at Caleb as if seeing a ghost or a memory he'd buried long ago. His hand hovered almost unsure before settling gently on Caleb's back. The entire office watched breathless. Then, for the first time since Amara had started working for him 3 years ago, Graham Kensington spoke with a softness she'd never heard before. "Why'd you call me that, kiddo?" Caleb shrugged. "'Cause you look like my daddy in my dreams. Mommy says I don't got one, but I dreamed you." That's when something shifted in Graham's eyes. A flicker of something unspoken. Loneliness, maybe. Recognition. Regret. Amara tried again. "I am so sorry, sir. My sitter canceled last minute. I didn't know where else to take him. This won't happen again, I swear." But Graham wasn't looking at her. Not yet. He was still watching Caleb like the child had said something no adult in Graham's life had dared to say, that maybe there was more to him than quarterly reports and ruthless efficiency. Finally, he looked at Amara. 3 years she'd worked just outside his office. 3 years of perfection without recognition. "You have a son," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Bring him," Graham said suddenly. "Into my office." Amara blinked. "Sir?" "You heard me. You and your son. Now." The door clicked shut behind them. Amara held Caleb's hand tightly as they stepped into the corner office that overlooked all of Manhattan. It was sleek, modern, and cold, like a room made of glass and silence. She'd been in here maybe twice, always to drop off papers, always invisible. Now suddenly she was standing in the center of it, not as an assistant, not as a shadow, but as a woman with a child who just cracked open something even money couldn't protect. Graham rounded his desk and slowly sat down. Caleb, without hesitation, wandered over to the windows. "Wow," he whispered, pressing his fingers against the glass. "The cars look like toys." Graham let out a quiet breath. Not a sigh, not impatience, just an exhale, like letting go of something heavy. "How old is he?" he asked, eyes still on the boy. 5, Amara said, her voice barely held. "Looks older. He's thoughtful, has big questions. Sometimes I think he's been here before." Graham almost smiled. "Almost. You ever told him about his father?" Amara hesitated. "No, there's nothing to tell." That silence between them filled the room, thick with stories neither dared to speak. She expected the judgment, the lecture, maybe even a warning from HR, but instead he looked at her for the first time, really looked, as if he just realized that she wasn't just a line item on his payroll. She was someone who carried the weight of motherhood with grace, someone who showed up, always, and never asked for more than what she earned. Then he did something unimaginable. He opened a drawer, pulled out a small wooden dinosaur, clearly a keepsake, and handed it to Caleb. "Don't break it. That was mine when I was your age." Caleb lit up. Amara froze. Why did it feel like something irreversible had just begun? And if you're still here with us, if you're watching this and feeling seen, tap like or drop a or in the comments. You're not alone, and neither is she. By the time Amara returned to her desk with Caleb by her side, the energy on the executive floor had shifted. No one said anything directly, but they didn't have to. Glances darted like tiny blades. 2 assistants at the reception desk stopped mid-conversation as she passed. Emails that usually pinged her inbox every hour went silent. Even her work bestie Tasha, who usually greeted her with a "girl, I brought muffins," barely made eye contact. The whispers had begun. Later that afternoon, Amara overheard one of them in the break room. "You know, she brought her son into the CEO's office this morning." They were in there for like 20 minutes, alone. "Mm-hmm. That explains why her name's always on those client reports now." She walked out before they could see the sting on her face. Graham, of course, said nothing. He wasn't a man of gossip. He didn't even notice it. Or if he did, he didn't care. But Amara noticed. She noticed the way her inbox was suddenly CC'd on accidental memos. How the HR director gave her a too long glance in the elevator. How one junior associate suddenly offered to help on a task she'd been doing flawlessly for 2 years. Because in an office like this, a black single mother being acknowledged by the white male billionaire at the top, that wasn't just news, it was threat. That night, as she brushed Caleb's hair in the bath, she tried to smile through her unease. "Did you like being in Mr. Kensington's office today?" she asked casual. Caleb beamed. "He gave me a dinosaur, and he said I could come again sometime." Her heart thudded. Again, this couldn't become a pattern. No matter how gentle he had seemed, no matter how Caleb's face lit up around him, she couldn't afford for people to assume, and she definitely couldn't afford to let herself hope. Because the last time she hoped for kindness from a man in power, she ended up raising a child alone. But what Amara didn't know was that someone else in the office was watching too. Someone who hated seeing Graham smile. Someone who'd been waiting for a reason to strike. And now, he had one. His name was James Reynolds. Slick suit, smile like a shark, and a history with the Kensington family that most people at the company only whispered about. He had once been the golden boy of Kensington Holdings until Graham's father rejected his expansion proposal and handed the company reins to Graham instead. James never forgot the humiliation. And now he was back. Not through the front door, but through a hostile stake in a competitor, and a quiet campaign to break everything Graham had built. But James wasn't stupid. He knew the best way to unravel a man wasn't always through boardrooms and spreadsheets. Sometimes, you start with the people he's beginning to care about. Amara first noticed him in the lobby one morning. He held the door open for her, called her by name, smiled too easily. "You must be the brilliant Miss James," he said, as if they were old friends. "I've heard some interesting things about you." She gave a polite nod, uneasy. "I don't believe we've met." "Oh, but we will," he said, eyes flicking to Caleb, who clutched her hand with a wary look. From that day she saw him more, in the elevator, in the cafe downstairs, once uncomfortably in the hallway outside Caleb's daycare. One afternoon a sealed envelope arrived on her desk. No name, just initials in gold JR. Inside, a printed photo, grainy zoomed in, of her and Caleb walking into Graham's car. On the back, "You're not as invisible as you think, sweetheart." Her hands trembled. This wasn't workplace gossip anymore. This was a warning. But who was warning who? Was she the target or just the tool? Across the city, Graham stood in a boardroom full of tension. James had just offered to buy a controlling interest in one of their largest subsidiaries. And something about his smug confidence told Graham this wasn't about business anymore. Graham stood alone in the boardroom long after the others had left. The offer from James was still glowing on the digital screen. Lucrative, strategic, clean. But Graham knew nothing about it was clean, because behind the numbers, behind the acquisition, was a threat, a woman, a child, a fragile real thing that money couldn't shield. He closed his eyes and saw Amara. The way she clutched Caleb's hand in the elevator. The fear she didn't voice when he asked her to sit in his office. The way she never asked for more, even when she had every right to. She had never played the game, never sought attention, and yet just by existing in his orbit, she had become his weakness. And now James was circling that weakness like a wolf. Graham didn't need more money, but he did need something he couldn't name. Something he hadn't felt since his mother died connection. That night he called a closed-door meeting with legal and the board. His voice was steady, his mind made up. "I'm restructuring," he said. "I'll step away from the subsidiary in question. James can have it." Gasps, objections. "You built that arm of the company from scratch," one board member protested. "I did," Graham replied. "But some things are more important than what I've built." They didn't understand, but they didn't have to. Because Graham finally did. The boxes were packed. Caleb sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, scribbling Seattle or bust in red crayon across a cardboard flap. Next to him was Mr. Dino, the same little wooden dinosaur Graham had given him that first day. The apartment felt different now, lighter, like they were shedding not just a place, but a past full of silent survival and second guessing. Amara stood by the window, watching the sun dip behind the Brooklyn skyline one last time. She thought of the girl she used to be, the one who tucked dreams away in kitchen drawers and stayed small to avoid being called too ambitious, the one who never imagined a billionaire would look past her job title and see her as a woman worthy, whole, and loved. Now, she wore a delicate gold ring on her finger, simple, thoughtful, not flashy, just like the man who gave it to her. The wedding was quiet, intimate, no tabloids, no press, just love. Caleb stood between them, proudly holding the rings. He wore suspenders and sneakers and a grin that made the whole room tear up. When the officiant asked if there were any final vows, Graham turned to Amara and said, "I built companies to leave a legacy, but you gave me something I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a reason to be more than just powerful." Amara whispered back, "I spent so long being invisible. You never once asked me to be smaller." Caleb tugged Graham's pant leg. "Can I say something too?" Everyone laughed gently. He looked up at them, eyes big and honest. "I always dreamed I had a daddy, but I think God was just waiting to give me the right one." No one had a dry eye after that. As they pulled away from the curb, headed to a new city and a new beginning, Amara leaned into Graham's shoulder. And in that moment she knew this wasn't just a happy ending. It was the first page of a new story, one she finally got to write for herself. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever rebuilt yourself in silence and waited to be seen, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that don't just entertain, but understand. And share in the comments what part of Amara's journey was yours too.